and television go hand in hand, and the people who call the game have had almost as much impact on the game as those who have played it. For you guys, who is the voice of the NFL?
I think John Facenda. That's who's the number one guy people imitate. It's John Facenda and from NFL Films. It's, the voiceover and the Raiders. You do it better than I do.
The autumn wind is a Raider.
Right? I mean, I
You've
think
been waiting to do that all day.
Summerall's a close second to me, just because understated, and those times with Madden in the booth. I mean, that's what I remember. Yeah, I think those two are right at the top.
Well, and I'll throw out Howard Cosell.
That's a good one.
And again, if the theme is the NFL is a part of our culture and bigger than life kind of feeling, which I think is something we've certainly touched on and will continue to touch on as we talk about all these different issues, that Cosell really fits the bill in many ways because, of course, he was a news reporter and he comes over and he's covering the NFL. He's Monday Night Football and the awakening that was for kids like us to be able to watch more football on Monday night. And it was, of course, ABC, it was network. And so to me, Cosell takes us to a new level with the National Football League. And I'll never forget, as I'm sure many of us do, the night that John Lennon was shot. And you heard the news, probably you heard the news. I mean, you might have heard on the radio or somewhere else. But if you heard it on Monday Night Football from Howard Cosell, that is a significant impact.
Yeah, and what's interesting too, when you talk about Ali and Cosell and kind of, the yin and yang of those two, you even had that in the Monday Night Football booth with he and Don Meredith. Okay, so you've got Howard Cosell and then you've got Dandy Don singing Turn Out the Lights and that sort of thing. But, I've been thinking about that, and John Facenda obviously is the voice of narration, and I love the point you make. These points you make about Cosell too, because it did kind of add another dimension. But I started thinking, and it's like, what about John Madden?
Yeah.
And John Madden is a voice because it's so hilarious, it's so energetic. He brought so much color to that role as an analyst. He took that role to another level, and the fact that he was also a coach for 10 years as head coach and grew up in the NFL in the coaching ranks, was very successful, won a Super Bowl, and then when you think about his impact on society in another realm, the video game, and how many people associate football and John Madden to the video game. Boy, you throw that with him as a broadcaster and as a former coach, and now he's still involved right now as a consultant. He works with the league on some of these special committees and things like that. Madden is all in one, a phenomenal voice for the NFL. And I'd be remiss not to mention Chris Berman.
That's what I was just about to get into.
Oh, man. And you talk about highlights and Howard Cosell and those halftime highlights of Monday Night Football. Well, for another generation, the highlights were Chris Berman on ESPN with that NFL primetime, and when it was he and Tom Jackson and Robin Roberts together. Oh, that was must-see TV.
All-star cast.
Yeah.
What about nowadays? You talked about Berman, you talked about Madden, and of course the impact that they've had on the game is sort of unmatched. But what about what we're seeing with Tony Romo taking that Madden-esque, I'm going to throw out the rules and I'm going to do what I want to do? What do you think his impact will be in the sport of broadcasting?
I think it could be dramatic in the sense of being able to tell us what's coming up on the next play. Now, I'm not he talks a little too much for me, the constant, but the explaining the game from a quarterback's eyes, to me, he's taking a step from what we saw from Madden to John Gruden now to Tony Romo. We're seeing it through a quarterback's eyes. I like that a lot. It reminds me of when Hank Stram did Monday Night Football on the radio. And if you'd listen, I listened a lot on the radio. I cover the Cardinals driving across town to my house, and Hank Stram was uncanny at telling you what was coming up. It's like, hey, this X receiver is wide open. They need to go to him here. That's the stuff Romo's doing now, but on television.
And fans are much more sophisticated. They have much more information. They can find out every little detail about the team and the play basically the moment it happens because of social media, right? Because of Twitter and whatever else they're following. So that announcer that can cut through the noise and can give them the why or the how, maybe much more than what it was. Because the old days, when you waited for your newspaper to show up the next morning and then you would read the stories, well, clearly those days are long gone. And so it's going to be the successful announcer, Romo I think is one of them, who's in the future coming up, who's going to be able to cut through all of that, because people have so much more knowledge than they did in the 60s or 70s. And so it was a revelation for Howard Cosell to be the one giving us, giving us Monday Night Football. He's in my living room. He's in your living room. We're growing up an hour apart, Detroit and Toledo. He's in your living room, right? And but now you've got to do more. And I think Romo is that next generation that actually can pull that off.
Well, and you've got to do more instantly, but how does that change with a 20? What was that?
No, I was going to say, no, I'm sorry to cut you off, Tristan.
Go for
He's a game changer, no doubt about it. And the funny thing is that there are going to be more broadcasters coming along as we go on here that are going to try to imitate it. That's what happens, right? We talk about the NFL being a copycat league. Well, broadcasting can be a copycat industry as well. And so now my question is, are there going to be people who are going to be as successful as Tony Romo with his clairvoyance, where he's able to really have an enormous hit rate on knowing what's going to happen and when it happens?
It's really hard to do. That's really, you can know the game and be smart and not be able to do it. We saw it last year with Jason Witten. Student of the game, very smart, but it wasn't Tony Romo.
Well, there's a difference between Jason and Tony is that when you talk to him, Tony's very perceptive and very quick. Jason seems more thoughtful, but you see how quick Tony can be on his feet when he sees a play coming, or he's able to play off of the other people in the booth, right? So, that's got to be one
He's
factor.
able to convey that excitement to fans.
In a
when you watch
natural way.
Yeah, exactly.
Witten felt wooden.
Also, in the next 10, 15 years, we'll certainly see more women announcing, and we should. If the NFL fan base is 45% women, and girls and women would like to get into sportscasting and sports media, we're seeing that. So many more women that they play sports their whole lives, now they want to do it. They want to have a career in it, and that's certainly because of Title IX.
Do you think that women in the booth, the first role that they will get will be play-by-play or color?
Well, I think either one is fine. We've certainly seen with Hannah Storm and Andrea Kramer calling games and as a team, and that's a start.
Sure.
Women on the sideline was always the natural way to go and do that, which is fine. It's an important role, and I'm glad that role has been given to many, many strong women and many great women journalists and reporters. But the next step is the booth, because you don't want to be the add-on. Even if you are like someone like Michelle Tafoya, someone like Leslie Visser's not an add-on. That is a major presence there. You're still just not part of it the way you are in the booth. And I think that's the next step. And I think, by the way, there will be dozens of women who can fill that role. It's up to these leagues and the NFL and the teams to actually hire them now. And it's it's the 21st century. It's time.
Even Tafoya has said that she's felt like an add-on before, even when she wasn't involved in the commercial to promote Sunday Night Football. She said she had to have conversations, and initially she wasn't allowed into the production meetings either.
Well, going all the way back to the NFL Today, and Phyllis George, who'd been Miss America in 1971, and now she's on the broadcast with Brent Musburger and Irv Cross and Jimmy the Greek. And that was a revelation. That was, and I know Phyllis, and she's been a mentor and role model, for me, even though I was not going to be Miss America. That was not going to be my career path. But the point is that she was there and she did a fine job. That's a light years ago, in terms of where we are now. And I think everything is a step in the right direction. And I would also say more people of color. Obviously, as the nation, if this is our national pastime, the NFL, and as it is presented to the nation, if it wants to be as relevant as it is, and I'm sure it will be for quite a while, then every part of it needs to look like America. And it just cannot be a whole bunch of white guys, love white guys, cannot be a whole bunch of white guys just
Love you,
continuing
Ken.
talking about it.
Yeah, and you mentioned that about the voices of color. In most cases, they've been former players, and so I think that's where it really has to change in terms of the people that are actually getting the opportunities. Mike Tirico, all-star broadcaster at multiple levels in multiple sports. Okay, Brian Gumbo back in the day, but really wasn't a guy in the booth per se.
Greg Gumbel.
Yeah, Greg Gumbo now. James Brown is more of a studio host. Right. I mean, all of these guys have had tremendous impact in their roles. But to Christine's point about women in the booth, I think that's kind of the next frontier where you go beyond players. And I think, too, when I think about women in the booth, and you say, well, what role will they play? There's going to have to be some change thinking when it comes to who can be an analyst. Okay, are we going to just have a coach and a former player, or are we going to open that, open our minds up to having some other people being analysts who did not play or coach?
Well, the conversation always used to be, that, again, back in another lifetime, that guys don't want to hear a woman's voice. I mean, that would have been the argument in the 60s or 70s.
I think that
right?
argument still is happening now.
Well, and it needs to go away, because if you want to attract new fans, you probably got most of the boys, right? I mean, if they're playing football, girls and women are your growth industry. And they're not going to be horrified hearing a woman's voice. And in fact, most guys are growing up now with their sisters playing sports next to them. Their moms might be coaching them in their first soccer or whatever. Yeah. And so I think they're much more in tune to listening to a woman's voice than, say, their fathers or their grandfathers.
Sure. The reason I ask about whether the woman's role in the booth, the first thing and the first opportunity they'll get is play-by-player color, is I think about Tony Romo. And I think about how excited he gets. And then I think about the role stereotypically of how women should be as journalists and professionals. It's almost like having too much fun. You're already at a disadvantage. You already need to have this air of professionalism. Can you get as excited as Tony Romo in the booth and not be knocked for being a fangirl? That's sort of the question that I have in my mind in terms of
Look,
what
you're
your
going to get
thoughts
knocked
are.
no matter what you do in that job. Tony Romo, Jason Witten.
Sure.
Yeah.
Whatever woman's
Future
going to do
woman,
it, it'll
yeah.
be
Yeah.
whatever. It'll be what you're wearing, what you said, facial expression.
But is again,
it won't be fair. Nothing about it will be fair. I mean, you hope there are enough people out there who judge you on the quality of the work.
and what do we have, 6 women running for president now? So if people aren't getting used to having women being strong and bold and doing what they're doing on a debate stage or whatever, well then I don't even know where to begin with them.
Speaking of strong and bold, Sunday Night Football, #1 show in America for the last decade, regardless of it being sports or not sports. Do you think Sunday Night Football is the new Monday Night Football?
I don't think anything will ever approach Monday Night Football in its heyday when it first came out. Even Sunday Night Football. I think in terms of games and matchups, the league's taken steps to engineer that the Sunday Night crew gets better games than the Monday Night crew. So in those terms, yeah, Sunday night is a lot more attractive usually than Monday Night Football.
Yeah, it's the true national game because the 1 o'clock games and the 4 o'clock games, they could be split up depending. The 4 o'clock game is a largely national game a lot of times, but depending on your market, you
Sure.
may not see the prime game. And so no competition on Sunday night, and then there's still that natural audience that's there from watching the 4 o'clock games.
Sure.
And as you said, the matchups
Spillover.
that they give for the Sunday night games are, top shelf. So, yeah.
You cannot overstate how big a deal Monday Night Football
Right.
was when it came on the scenes.
Oh boy, yeah. Go ahead, Christine.
Yeah, it
'cause
was.
We remember that.
Right. It was just, what is this? First of all, you saw one game or maybe 2 at 1 o'clock, one if you're on the East Coast, and then 1 or 2 at 4 o'clock on Sunday, and that was it. And now there's this thing Monday night, and it's fun. And again, it is Cosell, and it's Frank Gifford, one of the great names in the history of the game. Obviously, a terrific player, and also an actor, and very, very involved on television. And then Howard Cosell, and you had other people coming and going, Keith Jackson, whatever. But it was just a revelation. And at the time when we had 3 channels, and PBS, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you had a couple U ones that were all fuzzy and crazy.
Right.
I know in Toledo we had that. Detroit.
What a sad TV life that
we were
was.
probably watching the Detroit channels. Some of them in Toledo. Anyway, bottom line is that you have to understand that again the communal nature of this. That when you went to school on Tuesday morning, right? Everyone was talking about Monday Night Football because everyone had watched at the exact same time. There's no DVRs. There's no VCRs at that time. You sit there and you watch it.
Yeah.
You leave for 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes are gone forever. So you were glued to the TV. And I think that's the magic of that. And that was, of course, Roone Arledge and ABC, and groundbreaking in every way.
And for me, and Christine, I know you both can relate. Staying up to 10:30 on a Monday night, on a school night.
Yeah.
You know, when I'm
And you guys
9
were in the
years
Central
old,
10
10
time
years
zone?
old,
Eastern.
11
Oh, Eastern,
time
yeah.
zone. Yeah. I mean, that was a big deal, but you had to watch those highlights. And Howard Cosell, the narrator, was just,
Yeah, and if the game
phenomenal.
was boring, you had Cosell and Meredith to listen to. You had the different factions. You had this sort of elitist over here, and
Right.
Cosell who thought he knew everything and did know a lot, and then you had Dan DeDon, kind of the Texas bumpkin, and but then he'd jab at Howard. It became entertaining. Sometimes even when the game was entertaining,
Right.
so you wanted him to shut up. But it was, not only playing games on Monday night, but putting that trio together was taking a huge risk, and it was brilliant, and it was just must-see TV.
Hey sports fans, you want to see more videos like this? Check out some of our other videos right here, and if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button. And stick with Sports Pulse, your heartbeat to what's trending in sports.